Hi, this is Astro Indicator Update, Excursions into Practical Astrology, Episode 7. This is today's content. As we normally do, we're going to look at the Moon Void of Course calendar for next week, June 24th to the 28th, during the work week. We'll get an update on the Dow Jones Industrials chart. We'll look at the Federal Reserve meeting astrology transits, which is taking place this Wednesday. This is a very important Fed meeting in the financial world. And finally, we'll look at what's going on with Julian Assange. Okay, Void of Course Moon calendar. See if I can do this succinctly. The Void of Course Moon happens every 2.5 days, and it is when the moon is transitioning from one astrological sign to another. Sometimes this can take place just in a matter of minutes, and other times it takes hours, even a whole day, 24 hours. It is important to be aware of this time period, particularly the lengthier ones, in my estimation, because there's a definite shift in psychology and a shift in mood. And I describe that shift as a sense of disengagement or almost shifting into neutral. And if this VC moon period takes place over several hours, then people really start kind of shifting gears. And the real desire, particularly during the week, is that people would rather be taking a day off, resting, playing, regrouping. Those are the best ideal ways to handle a long void of course moon. But obviously, sometimes we can't do that. We can, though, schedule important activities, reschedule them around these periods. And I think this is something to learn and to be aware of and incorporate into your calendar, because very often if we try to make big decisions or spend a lot of money or engage in very important activities like getting married, things down the road do not unfold like we would desire. Things kind of get off track. And so what I recommend people do during a void of course moon, if it's in the work week, is just to focus on kind of secondary activities and reserve the more important stuff for when the void of course moon has been completed. So when is it happening next week? Monday, June 24th. Actually, next week we don't have very long void of course moon periods. This one, actually before I get into that, just as a reminder, let me tell you again what's going on this week, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but there is a long void of course moon on Wednesday when the Fed is meeting. So that is a little ominous in my book. And there's a long void of course on Friday. Look at my last episode, and I'll go into that more in the time that I specify the time frames in that episode. But it's worth noting that there is a void of course moon when the Fed makes their announcement. Next week, it's the 24th, Monday, from 4:10 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., just 3 hours. On Thursday, the 27th, it starts very early in the morning and lasts till 6:30. But this is all Pacific Daylight Time, so it actually lasts till 9:30 if you're on the East Coast. So note those in your calendar. Experiment with yourself. See if, particularly when we have one that lasts all day, see if you notice anything, see if it's worthwhile paying attention to. Okay, update on the Dow Jones Industrials. Again, a lot of these lines are traditional technical analysis elements. The green trend lines, these blue lines are support and resistance. And here, this is a ETF of the Dow Jones. This is DIA, kind of a proxy. And this is Monday, June 17th, midday. And the market is up a little bit. We have the Fed meeting coming up on Wednesday, and they're deciding whether or not to, cut interest rates. So probably this market's not going to go anywhere for a couple days. I won't go into a lot of detail, but we do not have strong bullish astrological indicators. We have a couple little ones at the end of this week, or I would say medium strength ones. And then we don't hardly have anything. So this is a little bit of a sign, a signal about what possibly the Fed could be doing. They may be giving the market a little something, but then eventually the market may decide that that wasn't enough to keep things up at these levels, to keep prices up at this level. So again, on June 20th in particular, and 21st, Thursday, Friday, it may show up on Wednesday. We do have a little bounce potential. But from my experience, I'm not sure if it's going to be a huge bounce. And then we have almost a month of hardly any astro energy dates, plotted in the chart here. And so my guess is that we're going to get a pullback of some sort. This is not trading advice. I'm just sharing with you my research into forecasting reversals and bounces using astrology. Okay. Let's talk about this Fed meeting for a little while here. So the meeting is taking place this Wednesday. They always announce it at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. This is Jerome Powell, the current chairman. And so let's look at the Federal Reserve, through the lens of astrology here. And in all my videos, we get into transits, and we look at the natal chart in relation to the current positions of the planets in the sky right now. This inner ring is the date that the Federal Reserve was created, going back to 1913, okay? And these are where the planets will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. And this, in my, with my history, I think that this may be able to tell us something. At least it might give us some edge. And I'm going to share this with you. And again, this is not trading advice. This is just my opinion. Well, if you have some experience with astrology, these transits, there's so many exact hits going on in this chart. It is just incredible. So that tells me that this is indeed a very important Fed announcement. Now let's look at the natal chart just briefly, the 1913 chart. Here's the sun. It was opposite Pluto. And given this entity, the context starts to help us focus and define what the astrology is saying. So this entity is really has a lot to do with power and, positioning itself to be a very powerful factor in the world of particularly finance. Here we have the planet Venus just ahead of the sun in a very strong position, at least in how I do astrology. And, if this was just a person, this could mean relationships and what you're interested in and like to do and so forth. But Venus also has to do with money. So this is just as clear as a bell that this entity has to do with, dealing with a power position relative to money, okay? And I'll even say we have Mars on the ascendant, that they use this in a very, let's say, I want to say almost like I'm hesitant to say this, but they almost use it like a weapon. And so this is a very powerful chart. Moon in Scorpio, and so there's just a lot of kind of backroom, obscure operations going on in how they deal and define their policies. So let's look at the transits. Well, to begin, here's the Sun on Wednesday. It's in Gemini. It is conjunct the Pluto in the chart. It is reinforcing this identity as being, the most powerful entity in the world. What are the odds of this? Then we have Jupiter transiting. Here's Jupiter, and it is conjunct Venus, okay? And I think this is maybe, and this is my bias, the most important transit in this chart, because I can see the change in the Fed as Jupiter has come into this close to approximation with Venus over the last 6 months. And the shift that has taken place from being very conservative and forecasting that they're going to raise rates and tighten rates and so forth, to one that's much more accommodating, where suddenly they want to define lowering rates to zero as something that's maybe within the realm of normality, which it's not. So I see this as being symbols for expanding the money supply. Okay. Now, I could go on and on and on in the debate about what they're going to do and what they should do and the merits of the Federal Reserve and whether they should exist or not. But let's stick with what I think that they will do here, okay? So we have Jupiter conjunct natal Venus, which has an expansionary, just from the traditions of astrology. This is, should be add confidence to the market. It should be, expanding the money supply and so forth. Then we have sort of a Jupiter element where the transit of Pluto has been, here it is at 22, has been in a conjunction with Jupiter. And again, this sort of also represents their reversal in their policy positions and their announcements over the last few months. One from, predicting that they're going to forecasting rate increases to suddenly thinking that they need to go in the opposite direction. And I could go on and on. Maybe this may be too much astrology for the average viewer. The only element in the transits that sort of suggests that they may tighten or do nothing is that we have Saturn here in retrograde coming back over the descendant, which is a sensitive point. In addition, we have Venus, which is not as powerful as the Jupiter element down here. Venus is in conjunction with Saturn. And this indicates a tightening, indicates a conservative approach to things. But this is more transitory. This is a quick little blip, and so I think if they've been planning on what they were going to do over the last week, this energy of being accommodative would have prevailed. Okay, that's probably my main point here. I could go on and on. I really see why a year ago here the Saturn energy was conjunct the Sun a year ago, and that's when they were really getting into their tough talk about needing to raise rates and their dot plot or whatever it's called, going into the future of how many rate increases they were going to have in 2019 and so forth. Well, that was a conservative, authoritarian element of it defines tightening. So they were in that mode. Now Saturn has moved on, it's away from the Sun, and this Jupiter energy is kicking into gear and will become stronger over the upcoming months, particularly into the first of the year. And so, expanding the money supply, reducing rates to zero or whatever, are real possibilities with these energies. okay? So don't trade on this. This is just my opinion, and but I think it's very revealing about how their positions have changed, and I see it real clearly in the astrology. Okay, Julian Assange. What is going to happen to him? He's had a tough 6 years, no doubt about it. And now they want to, bring him to the U.S. So let's look at his chart. I think he was born in 71, if I remember right. He's a Cancer. He has Sagittarius on the ascendant. This is his natal chart. And again, when you know a little bit about the person or about the Federal Reserve as an entity, then suddenly the symbols, you can focus in and see what you can pinpoint and start seeing what that means in this person's life. And they become more sharp and clear and defined. So he has, Jupiter, which deals with publishing, very close to his ascendant. He has Venus in Gemini. This is someone who likes to, this is what you'd find in a journalist, okay? He probably feels like he's protecting the world by, revealing things through his research. He is someone who has Moon in Scorpio, sort of like the Federal Reserve, but in this case, Moon in Scorpio is probably represents his behind the scenes research and uncovering kind of the darker elements of the intelligence world. So what's going to happen to him? Well, he's had, given what he's been doing, then the transits that he's been going through, you start seeing how they can be expressed. And over the last 6 years, here's his sun right here. Over the last 6 years, he's had Pluto opposite his sun, which is oftentimes a symbol of crisis and oppression of the deep state, coming down on you and putting him, just see what happened to him. Putting him, his own individual life has been squashed. However, that energy is moving out of Capricorn. Saturn, that has been following it, is no longer opposite his sun, okay? It's going to be hanging around for a number of months, the Saturn energy, which, can be represented by his imprisonment. But it too, in a few months, will be diminishing. The Pluto is going to hang around and be part of his kind of this oppression or suppression of his, his ability to communicate to the world. It's going to hang around for a year or so. But some of these darker, heavier, more intense energies are waning. So that Pluto transit that I just mentioned, opposite Mercury, will not be over until 2021. Jupiter, which is right here, by the early part of next year, January, February, is going to be opposite his sun. Okay? And this should open things up for him in some way. There is possibly a light at the end of the tunnel here. Other factors, which maybe I won't go into detail, but he has a transiting Uranus squaring Vesta. Vesta has to do with intelligence, the intelligence world. Uranus is opposite his natal moon. Here's Uranus. It is opposite his moon. So this too implies that there could be some, opening up, some, a sense of personal freedom or a possibility for freedom in his world, in his outlook. And I'm not sure how that could be being conveyed to him, but this will be exact, over the next year. Back and forth, it'll be in aspect with the moon. There's a little danger short term because he has Mars coming up to be in conjunction with Mercury. And so things may not change over the next several months. Particularly, I hope nothing happens to him over the next couple of weeks, because Mars is transiting Mercury this weekend. But I just wanted to put out there, maybe someone could pass this on to him, is that there are possibilities that things could be moving more into his favor, particularly by early next year. So I'll leave it at that. So I can just really see what, the time period, that the last 6 years is just clear as a bell in terms of this transit of Pluto and how it's been reflected in his isolation and imprisonment. And now there are possibilities that these things could change in a positive way. So that's about it for today. Again, my name is Stephen. I have a background in art, a master's degree in psychology. I've been studying astrology for 40 years and applying it mostly to financial markets for 25. I'm a hard money and cryptocurrency advocate, and if you like this video, please consider subscribing. I do accept Bitcoin donations. So that's it for this week. I'll probably be back in about another week. Bye for now.